Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today we finally cover part 3 of the Joe Mac series review, which includes the pricey Super Nintendo Joe Mac 2, as well as a few minutes at the end talking about Joe Mac for the NES. For those of you that clicked on this primarily for Joe Mac 2 or just to see another It's Expensive but Is a Good episode, consider the Joe Mac on NES more as bonus coverage at the end, just a cherry on top of this prehistoric dinosaur fighting sundae. It only takes a glance and a listen for Joe Mac 2 to grab your attention with wonderfully fluid and detailed sprites. If you happen to walk into a room while somebody is playing this at the right time, you may fall to your knees and wonder, what kind of epic adventure have you been missing your entire life?
Hold on, that didn't look right. It doesn't look anywhere near as cool on the recording device as it actually does on the TV. And I want to make sure I actually show it to you guys the way it's supposed to look, you know? I wish there was a way to do that. Well, so you're giving up that easy, huh? I mean, I wouldn't really call that giving up. It's not my fault that the Elgato can't capture the damn footage. Look, dude, excuses are like buttholes. We all got them, but they all stink. Yeah, I get that, but I didn't really think that was an excuse. Thought it was more of a reason as to why I can't show what it's supposed to look like. I mean, I didn't make the Elgato HD. It's supposed to capture it, right?
Well, you better think of something, man. I think it's some straight garbage that you can't. Maybe try a little harder, dig a little deeper, see what you can come up with.
Dig deeper? What does it even mean by that? I mean, I guess the flash really is just alternating white and black back and forth very quickly. Maybe if I were to play with that and try to get it to speed up, throw up some transparency, maybe we could actually do something here.
Hey, not bad. You're welcome for pushing ya. I'll catch you later.
Well, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's better than being a pixelated mess, that's for sure.
Now that we have that fixed, we can better appreciate this game and look at it the way it's supposed to be. There's no doubt that Joe Mac really has some excellent themes, vibrant visuals, with outstandingly detailed and badass sprites for all of its bosses. Plus the loud and spine-tingling cry, especially as it falls to the floor. And those facial expressions, man, how intense is this? Throughout the game, you traverse a solid variety of terrain, from the jungles and mountains to swamplands, treetops, frozen tundra, and freezing caves, along with the volcanic fiery theme as well. And all of the levels and locations are tied together nicely with a free-roaming but small overworld. They use visuals to match the kind of stage you're entering, plus it has a really cool little overworld theme. The only huge shame in all of this is that there's only 6 levels in the entire game. Granted, the levels do provide a solid challenge, and some of it even seems a bit high, which isn't horribly surprising as difficulty was used all the time back then as a form of artificially lengthening the experience. For the first Joe Mac on Super Nintendo, however, you've come to expect a bit more, with the first game having 12 levels. And hey, we can argue it's not about quantity, but quality, and I'm not necessarily here to make a case on why this game isn't even as good as its prequel that came out 3 years before it. At face value, this game looks and sounds without a doubt like a sequel. It's hard to not keep coming back to the visuals, like the depth of scrolling in some spots, your fluid animation, and attention to detail in places that many would say don't even matter. Your character just has so much more depth as well, with outstanding animations, plus with little new features like idle personality or pressing down in water to take a gulp and spit it out an enemy or on fire. As you focus on everything that it did, you can feel the layers are getting pulled back and we're closer to a more fully realized Joe Mac concept. The level design is a bit more sophisticated with much more variety in its platforming and some more cases with vertical movement. These additions are awesome, and all of these things coming together help bring the prehistoric world more to life. When looking at this sequel, it's important to reflect on what was good about the series to begin with, and these things are not necessarily what made the originals great. It was the solid handful of diverse weapons, multiple interesting and intimidating boss fights, with enough stage variety to keep it fresh, and enough enemies and challenge to keep you busy. It's so important that Joe and Mac at least does the things that its prequels did well: great audio visual, strong and easy to understand gameplay with a variety of environments, which it really does for the most part, and then some. With all of that in mind, I loved playing through Joe and Mac 2, and this was just my third time ever doing so. That's not to say the game can go without criticism, and I'd say I could boil down that criticism to just a few things, with the theme being that this game has some really great bones but seem to be rushed into completion. Firstly, it needs more stages and more bosses. What we received was pretty darn excellent, and I'll get more in depth on what it's like to really play through this game in a bit. Secondly, there are a few ideas that are just in no way fully realized at all. First example, while you can run into a few dinosaur friends along the way within these levels that are broken into multiple segments, they seem a bit like an afterthought for a couple of reasons. One, for as fluid as most things look in this game, how do none of these guys have an idle animation at all? It's just one single sprite. Then when you move with it, it looks like it only cycles through like 2 phases, and I don't mean to overanalyze, but it looks pretty cheap. Not only that, gameplay wise, they can only last for one hit and disappear. What the hell is that? Overall, I guess it's not a huge deal, but these could have been really bumped up a few notches with a little graphical polish and simply better ways to use them. It would be so cool to actually feel powerful with these things and plow through sections of enemies, not to be even more careful than you were before. The pterodactyl at least has a few more sprites than the others and provides a change of gameplay since you can fly by pressing the jump button to bop up in the air and also shoot seeds out. Funny to mention, you even abuse this thing in the same way Mario did to Yoshi by punching it in the back of the head. But with the other ones, they definitely could have done a bit more. Speaking of doing more, there's a cart section that fails at putting your character in a proper position to react in time. It's in the beginning of the game. Our character belongs in the rear quarter or third of the screen, so you can at least see what's coming, and these things are instant kills, which sends you back a little bit, and if that's not annoying enough, you make it through these obstacles just so you can safely smash your cart into a wall with you still in it. I mean, what is the point of that? One of the game's finer moments is when you blast off of a geyser and land on the back of a stegosaurus. As it transitions to nightfall, you fend off enemies, and it's extremely badass, such a strong aspect of the game. After you survive for a little bit, the dinosaur will go to sleep, and that's when you leave. The dinosaur is then woken up with a club to the face, and seeing nobody else around, it targets Joe, and transitions into rhythmic and tense drums with side-scrolling and platforming, then a boss fight. It's simply perfection, and what else could you really ask for? When you defeat this dinosaur, clearly in self-defense as we were leaving, you are awarded with your first rainbow stone. But why? We were just about to walk out of this place, got caught in a bad situation, yet we picked up a key item. It doesn't make any damn sense. So it's a good thing the dinosaur attacked us, I guess? Like, what's going on? Speaking of more ideas not fully realized, Joe and Mac has a really puzzling aspect to it where you can collect currency and upgrade your home, and you can even do some other side games like finding a wife that actually likes you and have a child, and this can determine how the game even ends for you. Now hey, as a kid, I could totally see why this would feel deep and new, because it is, but this little attempt at pseudo-realism is somewhat ruined by not even having a battery save. You need to write down passwords to even keep track of this stuff in your progress, and simply mentioning the password screen reminds me that there are 2 themes in this game that are just downright repetitive and annoying. I mean, this is straight trash, and I find myself entering passwords as quick as possible because the theme is maddening. They really didn't need it. Plus the theme you hear in the village, I just don't know about this. Maybe it's something I'm not getting or feeling personally, but it's really annoying to me, so I find myself not wanting to spend much time in the village at all, where it would be totally different if it had an easier melody to listen to. Fourthly, in a game that tells you to collect 7 rainbow stones, you might hope that means at least 7 really strong and outstanding levels, but no, you actually get one of them just by talking to this old man. and in a game that needed more levels and more boss fights, I think this was a big mistake to just hand over one so easily. Damn, this game needs a 7th level so bad. One final thing to critique, but is totally justified, is the game doesn't have any variety of weapons really at all. You have the club most of the time, but the upgraded weapons are virtually the same thing, sending out a white crescent wave thing, and it looks great, and it's strong, but it's just kind of too bad there weren't a few different weapons like its prequels, and these aren't even drops. They're always located in the same areas in the game for you to pick up, which is just kind of a bit lame, you know? So much different than picking up 4 weapons that you can alternate through with select. With all of that being said, I hope it's clear why Joe Mac 2 leaves me with some internal conflict. The first time I played this game was when we saw it on the shelf in a Hollywood video rental store. We couldn't wait to see it, and the refined presentation blew us away. Even the start screen had our jaws drop. Now getting into it, there's some stuff that I didn't even have to dig whatsoever to criticize, but then at the end of the day, you just have to ask yourself, is this fun? And yes, it absolutely is. There just needs to be more of it and refined, like the best of the true sequels were doing at the time, but they did some really awesome stuff like foreshadowing with a few of the boss fights in dangerous and cool ways. They did it with almost all of them, except for the one that you fight in the water. A lot of these parts are just done so well, they look great, and they keep things really interesting. Something that they also included, which was a great idea, was a boss rush. Fair argument would be that maybe this doesn't make any sense that the dinosaurs are all here as if they coordinated this effort together, but gameplay wise, it's sick and well done. For the most part, with practice, the bosses are pretty easy and some die too soon, aside from the damn Triceratops. They don't have him very high in the boss list as determined by their health, but this guy is annoying. With 2 attacks of either vomiting or blowing rocks out of his nose, there's like no movement. You have to park right next to him and just react soon enough, as he attacks more often when his health is dwindling. I would tell you that the boss fights in general are too easy, although I don't really think making them harder is the answer. I think just opening up the fights a bit more with additional cycles and attacks, with more health but less of an invincibility period so they could actually be more lively and chaotic. I think the water dinosaur fight itself is perhaps most well done in terms of how much they can actually move around with a purpose and not feel confined to a strict pattern. As nice as these sprites are, just wish there were a few more of them to liven things up. The final boss, Gork, who stole this magical crown, you first encounter him for the 7th stone before the whole boss rush, when you're told to go back to your village, as you can see through the game's telescope, which is just another small idea that they played with. You can see he's no longer at his home, but actually terrorizing yours. But skipping ahead to the final fight, he's of course at the end of the boss rush, and let me tell you, you will get your cheeks spread by this guy if you don't know what's going on. His range and abilities are insane, so you have to sit right outside of his range, then jump to hit him when he's in the air. If you try to approach him straight up while he's on the ground, he will beat your ass with his arms that are longer than yours plus your club. Straight up Dulcim in here. You won't even stand a chance. Sometimes you kind of get pushed into the corner if he jumps a few times at you while he's still invincible, and it's pretty hard to make it out of those situations. Usually you can keep him at bay long enough as long as you don't prematurely jump or anything. Eventually he'll fall down in defeat, and as you go to grab the crown, he actually summons it, and the game has a really epic final boss with a ton of health. The wave effects on the screen are sick, the music is sweet, the sound effects are awesome, and he provides some real variety with his several attacks. And once you realize how to deal with those attacks, getting through both of these fights with only 5 hearts won't seem nearly as menacing or impossible as it does at first. There's a fair amount to look at, but it's not nearly as cheap as his first form or the Triceratops, for example, and it really is cool with a tremendous amount of satisfaction once you finally get through him, because losing your 3 lives means starting the level over again in this gauntlet of bosses from the beginning. More annoying yet, a true game over means you actually have to re-enter the password because it kicks you out, which is just so unnecessary. Once it's all over, it's really quite sad that it is, as your little boat carries you off of your island. You almost hope that this was only the first half of what could have been a giant and amazing sequel. But overall, Joe Mac 2, it's expensive, but is it good? Yes. Joe Mac 2 is a good game. It's not quite as long or as fully realized and fleshed out as it could have been and should have been in some regrettably obvious ways, but it's a joy to look at, listen to, it's 2-player, and finishes with a rock-solid, challenging, exciting boss rush segment and a final boss that is better, more developed fight than basically any of the others. You'd have to be a pretty big fan to justify throwing down too much money on a game that doesn't take that long to beat and has some flaws, but definitely worth playing if you get the chance. Next is a game that has led to some really interesting playthroughs and helps me further appreciate how far the series has come. We have Joe and Mac on the NES. Ironically, this actually came out after the Super Nintendo port, and so did the Game Boy version, as well as the Sega Genesis. The order these things came out is just so strange. Personally, starting out with the Super Nintendo Joe and Mac almost 25 years ago and getting to the 8-bit port of one of my very most played early childhood games, let's take a real look at the final one we have to cover, aside from actual arcade cabinet one day, if I can find one. Definitely just as strange and surreal as it would sound like, to see and hear such a different version of the game that's already been burned into your memory. It's fascinating to see the familiar faces while taking in all of the vastly different strategies you have to go about in order to go anywhere in this game. It isn't super long really, especially if you try to be smart about avoiding most of the enemies that you don't need to fight in order to move ahead, along with limited or at least conveniently timed deaths. It's only around 20 minutes or less, and very important to mention, you only get 3 lives to finish this game. Yep, it's one of those, just like the Game Boy version, where you don't even get to continue once from the game over screen. If you go into this game expecting anything like the Super Nintendo's much more mild difficulty, you'll get absolutely trashed by the first level. I know I did my very first time playing. One of the things to get used to is how you move in this game compared to what you're used to. The running speed is fine, but your character stops running when you attack. You even briefly stop in midair if you do a small jump and use your attack. But if you press up and jump to do a bigger one, you can actually maintain your control and momentum this way. So once you find that out, your strategy can drastically change on the bosses that once felt really freaking hard, or even moments of feeling downright impossible. But that's just how some of these games and challenges are. You get slapped across the face at least a few solid times before you start to notice strategies and holes that you just couldn't find the first round of attempts. Plus, some of the bosses, as familiar as they look, just shock you with how fast and punishing their fights are. Like the way the planet can just pull you in and spit you out of bones, killing you immediately if you're anywhere near it, which does not happen in any of the other versions, and that means you need to play it in the back of the screen. But then you'll wonder, when can you attack, since it literally keeps replacing the enemy right in front of you when you kill it, plus there's multiple and constant pterodactyls coming down in a seemingly random order of routes. So you seriously just need to ignore all of that and jump over and over, trying to pour as many of your maximum 2 throws at a time that you can. Speaking of pterodactyls, those fights are pretty dang nuts. There's always little ones coming through, and you really have to get a sense for the rhythm and exact timing of your tall jump, horizontal guidance, and trajectory of your throws. You're still going to take plenty of abuse, but it's like you just need to finish it before you die. On top of all of the challenge, there's also just a couple of things that make you go, huh. Like the fact that this guy used to move all over the place is now the easiest boss in the game that just sits in one place and shoots 1 or 2 projectiles, barely even trying. But the most ridiculous and creepy difference between the games is the laying T-Rex compared to the Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Boy, with the NES. I mean, what the hell is going on here? Seriously, why did they do this? The way the game handles its enemies too is just drastically different, where they will respawn infinitely if you do not move forward, which can end up making some screens just feel ridiculous if you hesitated for too long. Finishing the game is almost as ridiculous as the Game Boy version. There are a ton of birds coming everywhere, and most of the weapons that you have simply aren't strong enough to get through them in one shot. And again, all with 3 lives. It's really a lot to ask from somebody. The final boss is more of a take on the arcade original, which the Genesis followed pretty closely, while the Super Nintendo did its 2-form devil fight, which was way different, and the Game Boy just had you attacking the heart on its own, as it releases rocks and minions. Something I have to bring up is the fact that the NES version actually did something I specifically wished for when talking about Joe and Mac 2. Lower the invincibility period, or in this case remove it altogether, and give the bosses more health, which is exactly what helps give these fights a much more frantic and aggressive feel to them, which not only makes them challenging, but also something you want to keep coming back to once you're in the zone.